Welcome back to The Visible Artist. My name is Sophie Loxton-Lucas, and I'm excited to bring you the second ever episode. I travelled down to Leicester to see the painter Tim Fowler in his studio and spent an afternoon meeting the other studio holders and of course chatting to Tim about his work and his practice. He is so open and generous with his advice on how he has discovered opportunities in the art world. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation and find it useful. Hi and welcome to today's episode. I am currently sitting in the studio of Leicester-based artist Tim Fowler, and it is so wonderful to be here surrounded by his paintings. Everything about Tim's style feels bold, expressive and confident. The large scale of his canvases, the big features and the choice of intensely bright colours. Whether Tim is painting architectural structures, portraits or botanical subject matter, each work feels like a joyful experiment of colour, form and texture. He uses a variety of media, including oil, acrylic, spray and graffiti inks to add abstract fragments, broken lines and impulsive marks, all of which gives his work a lively, expressive feel. But however spontaneous the work appears, Tim is very deliberate about his choice of bright, sometimes fluorescent hues, and each juxtaposition is created and balanced very carefully. With such a bold, recognisable signature style, it is not surprising that Tim's work is so celebrated. He has recently had solo shows in London and Leicester, both supported by the Arts Council. He is represented by several galleries. He has exhibited at the Other Art Fair in London and New York. He was interviewed by Sky News about his NFT skull project, featured as a highlight artist on Channel 4's Flawless, and often has private commissions for clients on the go. And most recently, he's worked on a particularly exciting residency project titled Provenance at the Victorian Pumping Station in Hampton, London. So I really can't wait to hear more about this. Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me in your studio.
Thanks for the introduction. That was great.
Yeah, it's always quite strange reading that with the artist sitting in front of me.
Yeah, but it's like, I forget a lot of the stuff I've done. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like a little sense of accomplishment, you know?
Yeah, it's probably quite a good exercise. Maybe write your own introduction from time to time as a boost.
Yeah, because often, you know, I'm constantly looking to the next project. So as soon as I've done something, it's pushed to the back of my head. So it's nice to hear it out loud again.
Yes, well, it's really lovely to be in your studio. It's such a bright, airy space, and there are walls dividing the studios, of course, but they're not right to the ceiling, so you can see the other artist studios and just has that real community feel.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the benefits of being in Leicester, is it had such a huge textile history. There's a lot of these old big factories that are just kind of sitting empty, and you can get them for, you know, fairly cheap. And like you said, they've got the big windows, the high ceilings, the natural light, which is, you know, it's all perfect for me.
And how long have you been here?
I have been here coming up to 5 years now. I moved in when I heard about the space opening up. I was at another studio, and I initially came just to check it out, just to be nosy, to be honest, to see who the new kids on the block were. I knew a couple of the artists moving in, and I loved the space and just went for it. Felt like a change. Not looked back since.
And you've expanded your own area in the building.
Yeah, it's become a little bit of a labyrinth now. So I started out with a good sized space when I first moved in for the first few years, and then as more and more projects came up and my work was more in demand, bigger pieces, I was lucky enough to extend it. I built some storage. It's still fairly messy, as you can see, you know, but it's just how I work, to be honest. There is organisation in there, but yeah, you've often got to climb over stuff to get around. But that's part of it.
Yes, it's great to be here because having worked on the fairs for quite a few years now, I've noticed there's been this group of Leicester artists that keep cropping up, and now I realise that you're all here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's another 3-4 artists here that that regularly do the Other Art Fair as well. So it helps with feedback, tips, just discussing ideas, logistics. We share vans to take the work down. And that, to be honest, that's part of why I enjoy being in a kind of communal space. Like, I've got space to paint at home, but I would go mad on my own in a studio. So yeah, it helps me out a lot.
Yes, yeah. So do you do all your painting here, or do you do some at home as well?
No, I do it all here. I recently had to get a temporary extra studio space because I had a really big 9-meter commission to do, and I just couldn't do it in here. I would have preferred to do it in here, but I just couldn't do it for the space. But no, apart from that, it's all here. I've tried to work at home in the past as well, but to be honest, dragging the materials back and forth, and I've got 2 young daughters, twin girls, 6 years old, so it's not worth the stress of trying to do anything at home,
Yes, and also I imagine that it enables you to really focus when you come here and be cut off from the rest of the chaos of your life, potential chaos, I want to assume.
I mean, it just makes it feel more professional, like a job. Like, I get up, I do the school run, and then I come to work, even if I'm still in the same dirty, painty joggers that I'm always wearing. It feels like as soon as I step through that door, I make myself my morning coffee and plan out the day. It's a job. If I was at home, there's too many distractions, like you said, and it's getting into that right mind frame of, right, home time's left, professional painting time now.
Yes, and you mentioned the divide between home and work life, but even within your practice and your professional work, there seems to be a lot going on. So it must be hard balancing commissions for clients, making your own work, showing at fairs. There seems to be a lot.
Yeah. Part of it is just, it's natural to me that I work at a high pace, I'm always like, whenever people ask me, oh, you seem so busy, I'm like, yeah, I'm so busy. But then I feel like I make myself busy. Like, I feel if I wasn't busy, I would struggle, I've got a fairly short attention span. So rather than trying to fight those kind of traits, I kind of embrace them. So I work on a number of paintings at the same time. So if I get bored of something, which I generally do, I can just switch to something else. And it's the same idea with projects, if I've constantly got something I'm working towards, then I just feel motivated all the time. I always refer to it as gears in a car. Like when I'm talking to other artists here, like I'll be like, right, I'm in fourth now. Soon I'm going to go into fifth. After Christmas, I'll go back down to 1 and it'll be a slower pace and I'll build it up. But generally it's simply because I like to work at that pace. I like to keep busy and I'm curious. I like to do different projects and just see what happens with it, not overthink it.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the picture of the enormous artwork, the commission that you did, the 9-meter work on your Instagram. I mean, it just looks incredible. How was that experience?
That was really intense, like intense in a great way. I'd put my name forward for the project through Rise Art, which is an online gallery I've been with since I graduated. It's one of the first kind of ones I came across. So yeah, I knew I was in the maybe pile. I didn't know much about the project. I knew the size. And then, I got the call saying I'd got it. I went to meet the team. And then it kind of dawned on me how big 9 meters was. And I'm fairly confident in my own ability, almost like overconfident, I'd say. I'm almost a bit deluded of what I can do. But the time frame was really short, so I probably had a month. And the painting was fine. I enjoyed that. I loved the painting. The hardest thing was the logistics. I had to physically make a 9-meter by 2.5-meter canvas, knowing that I was going to have to take the whole thing apart and transport it to the building, which was the 17th floor of a skyscraper, rebuild the stretcher and then re-stretch the canvas and then hang the whole piece. So that was probably the biggest weight on my mind throughout. The painting was, when you do something that big and there's that much pressure on it, it's best if you can just to not think of it and just paint from the gut and just, I say to myself, Tim, you can do this, you can paint, that's what you do. Push all the doubt to the back of your head and just do it. So overall, it was an amazing project,
So you got the work into the space and then you had to face these canvases and just start painting?
Yeah, so I painted them at a separate studio. Built the stretchers, stretched them myself, which was that was a struggle in itself. But luckily, I'd just done a recent residency where I'd been painting big anyway, so I was used to stretching 3, 5, 4, 5 meter canvases anyway. So I had the technique down. But just the whole taking it apart and re-stretching it and rebuilding it, which is something I've done before when I've shown in New York and LA, but only on a small scale. And there's things like, lining the painting back up evenly, stretching it tight again, you don't want it all baggy and sagging and not on straight. So it was tough, but to be honest, it went really smooth. I had some good people helping me. The company were really relaxed. They didn't put any pressure on me. I told them my ideas of what I wanted to paint. They loved the idea, and they just left me to it. They came to visit halfway through, but apart from that, they just let me have full control.
That's fantastic. And I was going to ask you about that, because looking at the piece, it's very much in your signature style, and you almost wouldn't guess that it was a commission. It just looks like one of your works. Yeah. So they just gave you full creative freedom? Yeah.
Again, I was lucky that the team was so understanding, because the botanical stuff was obviously the focus, my current focus now, and the focus then. And I'd recently taken a trip to Kew Gardens before I knew I was getting the commission. So I'd taken loads of research photos from all the different greenhouses and stuff. And basically just pitched my idea. I was like, look, this is what I'm doing at the moment. The fact it's this steel glass building in the centre of Birmingham, very urban. And this is almost like a botanical house in the actual building itself. And they just love the idea. They know. The thing is with me, like you said, because I've got such a recognisable style and colours, people know what they're going to get. I always say that if you want to commission me to do something, that's fine, but understand it's probably going to be pink, or it's going to have certain colours in it, and it's going to be this kind of style. And like I said, they were understanding, and that helped a lot. If they'd been really, some people might have their own idea of what they want, and if they try and push me in that direction, and then I'm stressing about second guessing my own opinions of what they want, then sometimes it's shown in the work, and you can see that the confidence isn't quite there.
Yes, it's interesting you say that, because your works are definitely feel very confident. And I know that lots of artists are often torn with commissions. With often the client says they like the style, but actually, or not even a client, that sounds quite a serious term. Sometimes it's just an enthusiastic art buyer loves the style, but actually has quite a different idea of what they want it to look like. And puts the artist in a very difficult position.
Definitely. I mean, I speak to a lot of other artists generally about commissions and just, business side of art in general. And I think no matter what commission you do, and even if they're giving you total freedom, there's always that element of pressure. You're always thinking, well, I like this mark, or I'm going to do this, but what did they say again? Or what was in the brief or the email? Yeah. And I've been lucky. I've done loads of commissions over the years, especially when I was doing the portraits. And people are always generally understanding. Often make changes if people want a few changes, but overall, it's always been smooth. But for artists in general, I think they'd all agree that commissions are unnecessary, kind of in terms of financial gain, obviously, but there's a lot higher stress involved.
Yes, I can imagine. And it's interesting you talk about all the other side of it as well, like having to stretch the canvases and get them up to the space. I think those logistics make it, some artists really struggle with that. And doing something like the other art fair is a real challenge from that side of things, particularly overseas.
But also that was a great practice for me. Like I said, when I showed with you guys in New York and LA, that was my that's how I got the work out there. I unstretched it all, took the canvases apart. I'd not done it before, got out there, reassembled everything. It was obviously a smaller scale, but it worked, and it was a good test. And now whenever I speak to other artists, I get a lot of other UK artists who ask me about the international fairs, and they ask about how I got the work over. And, I'm very open about everything I do, try and help people out where I can, just share the advice.
So in general, how did you find showing in New York and LA? And was it a similar experience? There was the same audiences, same work that you took over, or was it very different?
I think New York was more different because it was the first one I did. So I didn't really know what to expect. It was the first time. Like I said, I'd re-stretched the work over there, had a few issues with the stretcher sizes, so the bars didn't quite fit. So I was sawing pieces off to try and make it fit. But no, overall, I love the American fairs. Everything's bigger out there, so it feels like there's more space. And it's the feedback I like as well. Obviously, sales is a big part of it, but also it's the feedback, and not just the feedback on a new series of work or just my work in general, but testing the waters in the US. That's what I was very curious about. Is I've been trying to break into the US for a while now, and that was my route. The other art fairs obviously guaranteed thousands of people coming through, even if they don't know who I am. So yeah, it was a great experience. LA was a little bit more. I felt more relaxed because, like I said, I'd done it before. I corrected issues like the stretchers, so I didn't have any problems on that side of things. My work was definitely very suited to LA, which people always say to me, the colours, you should go to LA, you should go to Miami. And I really felt that, it's sunny over there, everyone's happy and cheerful, and they're drawn to the colours of the work. So I'd be keen to go back to New York just to, change things I did last time. Also, now I'm doing the botanical work is very different from the portrait work, and a lot of issues I was coming up with the portrait work is people would really love my style and the colours, but then it might be a certain person I've chose to paint that they don't want in the house, Say I've done Muhammad Ali or whoever, they're like, I love that and it's perfect, the colours, but I don't want Muhammad Ali hanging on my wall, which is understandable. So that was a barrier I kept coming up against. So I'd be quite keen to try both the US fairs again, LA, New York, with my new botanical series and see how it goes.
Yes. Oh, well, that would be really exciting. I mean, certainly in the US, the fairs, there's a lot more space.
Yeah.
And it's exciting
definitely.
to be able to present large canvases. And how did you find the conversations with the buyers, say, in Brooklyn? Were they quite different from the buyers in London?
I think the Americans, it seems like there's less small talk if they're not interested. I think the English maybe are very polite. So even if they don't like the work massively, they feel like they need to stop and talk about it, which is fine. You get the feedback. America, I found like if people didn't like the work, they'd just kind of walk past the stand and, they'd still be friendly. They'd smile, say hi, but, it was, any conversation was a bit more focused, a bit more serious.
So that was probably quite handy for you as an artist.
It was interesting. And it made things easier. I mean, you know what it's like. You do a lot of talking at these fairs and you're tired, you're stressed from, the initial hang. But yeah, it was more just a learning experience for me. And that's why I wanted to go out there. I wasn't really expecting to make massive profit, with all the cost of flights and everything else. I wanted to test the waters, test the market, and just try and build up my name over there, build up my profile.
Do you enjoy that side of presenting your work, talking to an audience whilst you're standing in front of the pieces, or would you prefer someone else to do that in a gallery setting?
No, I quite enjoy it. It's nice to have both options because you can't always do everything yourself, especially now my time is becoming more and more precious, due to children, just general workload. But no, I'm a social person anyway. I like to get the feedback. I like to see which pieces are catching people's eye and, why. And also, everyone has their own opinion on art, which is what I like about it. It's obviously subjective. So a lot of people will pick out little details, but, I like this bit. And I'm like, I didn't really notice that. Or I like the way you've done this. And it might be intentional. It might be something that's just happened and I've left. But it's all valuable, You don't want to let it control your practice too much. Like, say I took a piece to a fair and it sold and something else didn't. I try to, not let that affect me. I don't want to start producing loads of these paintings just because that one sold at this fair and this one didn't. So automatically this must be a bad painting,
Yeah.
So it's just taking the feedback, but understanding that everyone's got their own opinion.
And of course, there's that element of some work being more accessible, so it will be more popular. When you have thousands of people coming through a fair, it might draw in more people, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the strongest piece.
Yeah, and the perfect example I always used to talk about was the Frida Kahlo painting I did. I sold out all my prints, always really popular because people love Frida. They'd not seen her painted in my style. But yeah, it doesn't mean that that's the stronger painting. It means that she's the most iconic figure. And this was another issue I had with the kind of portraits and the celebrity portraits. And, another kind of issue, almost like a barrier that I felt that it was stopping me from evolving or getting to that next level.
Well, the great thing about residencies is they often enable artists to really explore their practice and push their practice. And that brings us on to one of my questions I had for you about your recent residency at the Victorian Pumping House. Could you tell me more about that? It looks like an amazing project.
That was mind-blowing. That was the greatest thing I've ever done to date by far.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I was at a point where I thought I'd missed out on the whole residency route, whatever, because of the children. I didn't want to take out 3 weeks, say to my wife, look, you've got to take the girls for X amount of time. So I thought, I'll have to just hold on till they're older, blah, blah, blah. And then this came about, and it wasn't an official residency that anyone could apply for that's ongoing. It came about because the director of our studio name, Stephen Albert, he used to work for a guy who's a lawyer. And this lawyer works for Touchlight Genetics, which are the genetics company that own the building. So that's how I was loosely introduced to them. They started buying my work over a few years. They liked my style. And then I did an Arts Council project, which is quite close to the start of my botanical theme. And so I also did this DNA test. I'm kind of going back a bit, but it will explain why it makes sense for the DNA company. So I did this DNA test just out of curiosity, expecting the Caribbean islands, Barbados, to come up because that's where my mum's side's from. But the Caribbean's too young for that, so it's all pre-slavery countries. So I got the sheet back, and I knew about slavery, but I was never overly interested in it. And it had all these West African countries. So that set me on this path of looking into migratory crops, cash crops, sugarcane, banana plants, cotton, tobacco, coffee. So when Touchlight heard about this DNA starting point, it fits in perfectly with their company. And they had this massive space. They knew that I was keen to work bigger and bigger. And they basically got together with Steve and offered me the building for 3 weeks. So it meant I could go down there and just fully immerse myself in the project, do some really big work, 4 meters, 5 meters, did about 7 pieces in the end. And yeah, it was amazing. I'd get up, work for like 12 hours, go back, look at the photos I've taken, think about the work, go back the next day and do the same thing again. And this was just coming to the end of COVID and lockdown, so a lot of artists were forced to hibernate almost. So for me to come out on Instagram and whatever and be doing this massive project, these massive paintings, it just went down really well. Yeah, it's just a great experience.
It sounds like it was an incredibly immersive experience, as residencies often are, both physically and mentally. It's really exploring your practice and your personal history, and just an incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean, again, it was overwhelming because of the size of the work I wanted to create. I did this all on my own. I didn't have I planned to get an assistant. I just didn't get round to it. So I had to build these massive canvases on my own, again, out of the timber, cut them down, screw them together, stretch the canvas, prime the canvas. And so it was tough and really physical at the start. The first few days, I remember feeling like I'd been hit by a car. Like my whole body was just aching. And I had a couple of moments of doubt where I was just like, I'm not going to be able to do this. Like, I can't do this now. But again, you just got to push those voices to the back of your head and just be like, look, I've got to do it. There's no other way now. And as soon as I got that first bit of paint on the canvas, I just felt like I could breathe, and it was just fun after that, relaxing. Maybe not relaxing, but fun.
In hindsight, it was relaxing.
Yeah, now really. I'm sitting here and I've done it. It feels relaxing, but at the time, it was tough, But it was a great experience, again, because it was a DNA company, and this is like cutting-edge biotechnical clean DNA. They were heavily involved in making the vaccines for COVID, making the clean DNA to send out to these companies.
Oh, yes, wow.
So I had all these scientists, and these are everyone's international, different countries, PhD, super clever, coming in to look at the work, and then bringing me into the labs, and, I'm putting all the white lab coats on, and they're showing me different cancer cells and all the different sections of DNA. And Johnny, the owner, he was very keen to have his kind of scientific staff introduced to art. And I would thought they were totally different to me, but he was like, no, it's that same thinking outside the box, that same creativity, like the way a scientist is researching. They've got to think outside the box to develop whatever it is they're developing, So that was something it was unexpected, but it turned out really well, and it was really interesting.
And has it influenced your practice art after the project? Do you think you'll go in a slightly different direction or explore something new because of the residency? Or is it a sort of self-contained project?
I definitely learn a lot. I want to continue with a lot of aspects of it. The problem with doing the residency was because of COVID and because of the nature of the company, I couldn't bring people to the show. So I would have loved to have actually had an exhibition at the end. A lot of people messaging me like, can I see this work? I managed to sneak Benjamin Murphy in from Delphian Gallery, and he's an artist as well. And it was great to talk to him because he's very intelligent. And just running through the concept with him and just talking about how I got to that point. But yeah, I'd love to continue to, one, work at that size, and two, move the project to an actual gallery space where people can come and see, and see the scale of it. Because you can see on Instagram and you can see me standing next to it, but until you see it in the flesh with the colours, like it's something different.
Yes, it must be quite as I used the word immersive before for you as the artist, but also for the viewer to stand in front of it. Yeah,
and that was what was exciting as well, because again, it was an active building site. There was builders that have never been interested in art. And they would come in, and at the start, they didn't really know what I was doing. I don't think they were really told. And they're like, what, are you painting the walls? I was like, no, I'm an artist. And I'm like, okay. And then once I started making the canvases, more and more of them started coming more regularly. So I'd come in the morning sometimes, and the builders would already be there, and they'd all be looking at the paintings. And
oh, that's lovely.
And again, it's introducing people that wouldn't normally care about the art world. The art world's got this label of being snobby, and you have to be really intelligent and have an art degree to go to a gallery. And seeing these just normal builders that are there to do their job, but they're like part of the whole process from start to finish. It was really, again, something that wasn't part of the initial plan, but it just turned out just really nice.
And you mentioned that they thought you were painting on walls.
Yeah.
In some ways, your work does have some hints of like street art, because you work with the graffiti inks and the spray, and it's got that kind of feel. Do you feel connected to that scene, or not really?
I've never classed myself as a street artist simply because I've never painted on the street.
Yeah.
But it's always been a massive influence from when I was studying. I studied in Sheffield. There's a few kind of Sheffield street artists there, Flem, Kid Acne. So I'd see their work around, and it was the colours. The colours are the main thing that drew me into street art. It's very similar, very bright, very impactful. But I just didn't really have the urge to try painting on the street, and I didn't want to do it for the sake of street art's becoming more popular with the mainstream art world, and almost jumping on the bandwagon for the sake of it. And also I'm scared of heights, so that would be an issue. So yeah, I'm always going to draw influence from it. I regularly go to the local graffiti shop, Graph HQ, and they tell me about different inks and stuff that I've never seen before that graffiti guys use, and I take them back and try them out. So yeah, there's always going to be influence there, but yeah, I don't class myself as a street artist.
Moving on to your solo shows in Leicester and London, could you tell me more about those? And I saw that they were supported by the Arts Council. I was wondering how that came about.
The first Leicester Arts Council show they called Plantation was basically I made a few months before my residency, so a lot of that work stemmed from that idea. So again, it's the DNA test. The Arts Council is something that I've been aware of for years, and they've supported a previous project I did maybe 3 years ago now. Initially, it was another artist that told me about it. She was like, look, Tim, you're ticking a lot of boxes. You do so much. You pay for it all yourself. You work. You do all this. You should try and get a grant from the Arts Council. And, it's a lot of paperwork, but it's an amazing opportunity for any artist. And I say this, any artist I meet, I say, look at it, look at the Arts Council, look into it. And it's a bit of paperwork, but basically you have an idea for a project, exhibition, whatever it is. You put your idea forward, you have to plan out your finances, timescale. You have to really think about it. They don't just give out the money, but it's supported by the National Lottery, and you can get up to £15,000, which is a grant. Don't have to pay it back. You've got to account for all the money, obviously. But it means that artists can be ambitious and do projects which they might not normally have the opportunity to do, whether it's financially or time or whatever else. So it meant that I could afford to spend more time researching, pay for more materials. It just gives you a lot more freedom as well. The exhibition was called Plantation. So again, it was around the idea of plantation crops, cash crops as well, botanical themes that aren't the usual thing that a lot of people paint or a lot of people are interested in. And things like tobacco. I love painting tobacco at the moment. And when I first started researching it, it's like everyone knows what tobacco is. It's such a big thing, smoking. It's got this kind of negative stigma attached to it for health reasons, obviously. But I'd never seen a tobacco plant. I didn't know what a tobacco plant looked like. And then I started Googling. I was like, oh, wow. And then I saw little illustrations with flowers on and stuff. And yeah, it kind of just led me on a whole new path. Like as soon as I went down that lane, I felt just doors just open up and my brain just started firing with ideas, and it just kind of led from one thing to another.
So you applied for your grant using these ideas, using this proposal for a show?
Yeah. Sorry, I went off point then.
No, it's okay. I don't want to come back to the logistics when you obviously found an exciting creative direction.
Yeah.
But I think the Arts Council funding is quite intimidating for lots of artists, but it's such an amazing resource that it's a shame that people feel like it's close to them. I think
a lot of artists aren't very academic in terms of paperwork and filling stuff like that. We all just want to paint, really. So a lot of people know what it is and like, I don't know. And like you said, it makes it intimidating. But when you actually sit down and read through it, it's basically just putting what's in your head onto paper. There's people that can help with it. I've sent out previous applications to a lot of artists to show them, to give them an example of how I put mine together and what I spoke about. So prior to that, I was just starting to get into that theme, the DNA test, or that kind of plantation stuff. So that was basically what my proposal was based around. I knew I had access to 2 gallery spaces, the gallery space here, and again through my director, the Florence Trust, which was kind of linked to the Residency. It all became one in the end. It is harder to get the Arts Council funded in London because basically each area has a budget they have to spend. So the East Midlands has X amount, West Midlands, London. So obviously it's a lot more competitive in London, but Leicester, there's less artists. So, you have a fairly high chance of getting it if you've already proven yourself. If you're already a practicing artist, you've done shows, they can trust that you can deliver a project. You can't just graduate and then get 10 grand's worth of funding for an idea. It doesn't work like that. So I was lucky that I'd already had plenty of exhibitions and projects I'd done, so I could prove that I was focused and professional about it all. But yeah, you don't always get it. I've been turned down before. They sometimes give you feedback, but you can just adjust it and put it back in again.
Yes, because it's a rolling application, isn't it? So you just keep trying. And I was watching the video that accompanied your exhibition for one of the shows, I think. And that's an amazing piece of content as well for you as an artist.
Yeah, that was the Potassium one, right?
Yeah, that was the Potassium. Yeah, with the fire extinguisher.
So
it's a great video to have.
Yeah, the Potassium Exhibition, that was before the Plantation one, but it was still during COVID. So we'd taken on a new extension to the studio. So we had this big empty space, and the director, again, he's very supportive. If you work hard and you prove what you're doing, he'll help you out wherever he can. And he had this big empty space, and he said to a few of us, does anyone want to do a short-term project in this space? Whatever you want, because he knows what we can do. He knows we can deliver. And me and another artist decided to do these 3 big canvases, which were 2.5 by 3 meters. And this was just when I started getting into the botanical stuff, but it was fairly abstract. But this was the very first time I'd painted that big before. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put myself under even more pressure and get someone to film the whole thing from start to finish. No plans, no drawings, I'm just going to start painting. And I bought all these tools. I bought mops and brooms and squeegees and a fire extinguisher I filled up with paint, which again comes from my influence from the street art world. I'd seen street artists do it. And yeah, I basically just painted these 3 massive canvases with a camera in my face for the whole time. But again, that was another amazing experience. And I like to put myself under that kind of pressure where I didn't know what I was doing. I was very overwhelmed staring at 3 massive white canvases with no initial sketch. But that pressure led to 3 really nice abstract botanical kind of paintings. And like you said, the video to see the process, because it was as much about the process of me painting that big, that scale, with the mops, slapping the paint on and spraying the fire extinguisher, which was obviously a lot of fun. And yeah, I learned a lot from that. And I'm still using elements of what I learned, whether it's mark making, colour schemes, tools I used, airbrush, compressors. Yeah, that's carried on to a lot of the work.
Well, this is a nice segue into another project I wanted to ask you about, which was the filming on the Channel 4's Flawless, where you had to paint live. Can you tell me about that project and how you found painting in front of the camera?
Yeah, that was very tough in terms of pressure. So Channel 4 actually approached me the year before with the pilot scheme for it, and they said basically we're going to pair portrait artists up with normal non-arty people that have some sort of disfigurement or disability. And the idea was I'd paint their portrait live whilst we'd have a discussion, like a kind of casual interview about their life and how it affected them growing up. And to be honest, the first year when they asked me about the pilot, I turned it down because the pressure and the anxiety was just too much. I was like, I can't do that. I can't do it. And then a year later, they did a second season of it, and they sent me videos of the first lot, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like obviously it's Channel 4, so the quality was very high. And I was like, you know what? As much as this is going to kill me in terms of anxiety and stress, I'm just going to force myself to do it because it's going to help my career out. It's going to help my profile out. They came to the studio, and we set her up. And my sitter, she had vitiligo, which is like a pigment disorder. So I'm sat there, I've kind of drawn her up, and she's telling me about her life. She grew up in Pakistan and then moved to London when she was like 13 or something. And it was a really emotional story. First of all, it was the pressure of painting someone and them seeing it after. That's enough pressure as it is, let alone someone that's been through all the stuff that she'd been through, the bullying, discrimination from her own community as well as other communities. And she's like talking about it, and she's like crying halfway through, and I'm tearing up, and the team are welling up, and I'm trying to hold it together, but trying to look, like an artist and keep it professional. And I had one sitting to do it. She went, came back the next day, we did the unveiling, and she loved it, and I gifted her the painting. We took photos, and overall it was a great experience. And, it got like 1 million views on the Channel 4 Facebook page, so a lot of people knew who I was from it, got commissions out of it, helped boost my name. But yeah, that was very, very intense.
Well, it's a lot of pressure on you as the artist to create the work live and also respond to her appropriately and sympathetically, but also not lose yourself too much in the emotion.
Yeah.
Focus on your work.
Definitely, yeah, because I'm getting sucked into the story. It's an interesting story. You can make a film about it. But at the same time, I'm focusing on the paint, like her eyes aren't right, or the mouth's not right, or whatever, and I've got to finish this by tomorrow. But then also I'm thinking of questions, and it's a conversation. I can't just ignore her and sit there painting. But it's one of those things that sometimes you just have to put yourselves in situations you don't particularly want to do because of nerves, lack of confidence, pressure. But I always try and look at the long game, and I was like, yeah, this is a nice thing to do for a start. It's a nice idea for a project. It's something different. It's going to help me, again, get my name out there. And yeah, I'm glad I did it.
Well, it's clear from this conversation that you are a very brave artist, Tim. You put yourself under pressure in quite different ways to really push your practice and further your career. So that's very impressive in itself. What advice would you give to an artist that's either starting out or perhaps feels that they're not sure how to take the next step?
I have this conversation a lot with, artists in Leicester, London, anyone who I can help out really, because I've been through it all. I know how hard it is. The main advice, which is it's not necessarily the right advice for everyone, but for me was do whatever you can, whatever opportunities come about at the start. You're not going to make a living from it straight away. Get yourself a part-time job so that you don't have that pressure, but also ideally you want to get a job that gives you enough hours to focus. Otherwise you're too tired to paint. So I used to work as a teaching assistant in a behavioural school for like 7 years, which meant that I finished at 3. I had school holidays, so I could still put a lot of time into painting. And my approach was pretty much to do whatever opportunity I could. Any little show, small art fairs at the start. I was doing an art fair called Art in the Pen up north, which was like £100 little small art fair, just to get my name out there, going to shows. But also the main advice I give to artists, young artists, even students, is to not sit and wait for things to happen. Like you don't need a gallery to give you a show. You can go down the Arts Council funding side of things, or you can save your money, hire out an empty shop, do your own pop-up. If you don't have much money, make a collective, chip in, hire a space out, put on your own show. Nowadays, with social media, it's a lot easier to be an independent artist in terms of getting your name out there and advertising your work. When I started out, Facebook was around, but it wasn't really a tool. Instagram wasn't really a thing. So I've kind of been part of that change and seen the benefits of it. Like, it can take over your life, and it is a nightmare sometimes managing your social media, which I'm sure we all know.
Yes.
But it's a tool, and it's using that. So my advice is just get out there and go for it. And I say this to Leicester artists especially, because Leicester's not a massive arts city, and a lot of people, especially graduates, they think that if the work's good, people will come to you. Like galleries will come and pick you up. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Not that early on. If you want to be in London, you got to go to London. You got to get out there. But also, again, if you can't, hire spaces. We've just recently, as part of this studio and a part of a collective we started called the Leicester Contemporary, which is run by our group called the Company of Artists. So we basically, Andrew Burke's another artist. He managed to get hold of a shop in the city centre. There's loads of shops that are empty at the moment, sitting there doing nothing. He spoke to the landlord. The landlord ended up giving him the space for free for a whole year. So we've been helping him set the space up, and now we run like rolling exhibitions there for Leicester. No funding. We invigilate it ourselves and with volunteers. And we had Castor Projects, which is a London gallery, very respected London gallery, come up and do a takeover. Infems, which is a female international art collective. I think it was founded by Rebecca Fontaine-Wolfe. They did a takeover last month. So it's just an example of, you don't need big galleries and Charles Saatchi to come along and buy up your whole collection. If you're proactive and you got the drive, you can do things on your own. So that's why I'd say, just be as independent as well as waiting for big galleries.
Well, that's incredibly good advice, and you certainly deserve all the success you have, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to me today. I really enjoyed this conversation.
It's been a pleasure. Just hope I didn't waffle off topic too much.
No, not at all. There's so much more we could talk about. I'd love to ask. Well, maybe we'll just have to do another episode in the future.
We'll come back. Second season, I'll come back.
Yeah, exactly. Part 2.
Thank you so much for listening. Please follow Tim at Tim Fowler on Instagram, and rate, review, follow, subscribe the podcast. All of that really helps boost us in the charts. I have an extra special episode coming up next, so look out for that. And in the meantime, have a wonderful week in the studio.